Welcome back. We are just a few hours from tonight's high-stakes Senate debate in battleground Pennsylvania. As we mentioned earlier, Democrat John Fetterman's team is trying to lower expectations, and Republicans are funneling more than $6 million to Oz, going all in on the state they see as key to winning control of the Senate. Joining me now is our panel, Washington Post congressional reporter Marianna Sotomayor, Navin Nayak, president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Republican strategist Jim Dornan. Thanks so much to all of you for being here. And we have a hefty plate to get through, so let's dive in. Let's talk about the stakes tonight. What does each candidate need to do? Marianna, what are you going to be watching for?
I mean, all eyes are going to be on Fetterman, right? Mm-hmm. He has already set expectations pretty low, kind of putting out a statement saying, listen, I have gone through a lot. There are things that, you know, you're going to likely see. I might trip up, essentially. We've had that conversation. But you know what? I'm still going to win this race. But you don't want to find yourself in a position where you have to set expectations pretty low for viewers. Yeah. So he's already coming in at a time where you just don't want to be. So it'll be interesting to see also how Oz kind of plays that game as well. Does he, like we were talking a little bit earlier, does he mention health? What is he going to talk about? How hard does he go against Fetterman on those things?
Strategy is going to be a real challenge. I think you're absolutely right, Marianna, for Dr. Oz. Jim, weigh in here, because we saw, for example, Herschel Walker set expectations heading into his debate. He really lowered them. He said, this guy's a great talker. You're going to hear all sorts of fancy words. I'm going to show up and do my best. And then when he came out of the debate, by all accounts, a lot of people felt as though he'd held his own or won. What does Oz need to do, and what does Fetterman need to do? So
if I'm Oz, I stay away from the health issue.
Stay away from it altogether.
It's baked in. Everybody knows what's going on with it. And I would be talking to suburban women in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia about crime and inflation. That's all I would be talking to, who I would be talking to during the entire debate. And because those are going to be the key voters in that state. I mean, he's got rural voters. He's got the Trump voters. He doesn't have suburban women yet, and that's going to be the key.
Navin, what does Fetterman need to do in order to get those?
Well, first, I actually think in terms of Dr. Oz, I actually don't think he has another card to play but the health one.
So you think he's going to bring it up?
I think he had this whole race for the last few weeks has pivoted around Fetterman's health, and because Oz doesn't have a substantive case to make, and if this is a substantive debate about abortion, even about crime, actually Fetterman has been really effective. You know, he carries on his arm tattooed the murders that happened in Braddock. He's not going to take a back seat to Dr. Oz on the issue of who's going to keep his community safe. And so I actually think that if this stays to substance and really we focus on how extreme, Oz has been pivoting to try and be the moderate. His policy positions are incredibly extreme. He's embraced denying the election. He's embraced a ban on abortion. And so I actually think that's where Fetterman has to take the conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what they both do. Let's take a look at what happened at last night's big debate in Florida. Of course, I'm talking about the one between DeSantis and Charlie Crist. And what you saw was this extraordinary moment where Charlie Crist really pressed DeSantis. Will you commit to 4 years in office? Let's take a look at that.
Ron, you talk about Joe Biden a lot. I understand. You think you're going to be running against him. I can see how you might get confused. But you're running for governor. You're running for governor, and I have a question for you. You're running for governor. Why don't you look in the eyes of the people of the state of Florida and say to them, if you're reelected, you will serve a full 4-year term as governor? Yes or no? Yes or no, Ron? Will you serve a full 4-year term if you're reelected governor of Florida? It's not a tough question. It's a fair question. He won't tell you.
We did not agree on the candidates asking each other questions.
Well, listen, I know that Charlie's interested in talking about 2024 and Joe Biden, but I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist.
It was really the moment of the debate. Jim, what did you make of it? Was it a smart response by DeSantis? He still didn't answer that question.
No, he didn't, and he probably shouldn't. It's the only thing Charlie's got right now, with all due respect. I mean, it's slipping away from him. Even the national folks know that. So I think that's the one issue he can nail the governor on, and he did. He did a very good job of it. But it's not going to make any difference ultimately.
Navin, what did you make of this moment where you have Chris pressing him basically on his presidential ambitions in 2024? Does it speak to the fact, this broader idea that the race is slipping away, as Jim says, that Florida is increasingly becoming less of a purple state and more of a red state?
I guess. I think it actually kind of unveiled just how dishonest DeSantis is, right? He's tried to portray himself as a straight talker. He's going to be, direct. It was a really simple question, and he could have answered it in an honest way. I don't know. It's something I'll consider. But I'm right now focused on being governor of Florida and winning again. And it could have been a moment to just show he's a different kind of politician. Instead, he just reminded, I think, voters that he's actually pretty dishonest.
Marianna, what did you make of the moment? And to some extent, are voters' opinions baked in the cake at this point, particularly where you have a race like this, which is not as close as some of the others that we're watching?
Yeah, it was an awkward moment. He could have said, here's my focus, or, I'm the one on the ballot this year. I know he did try and say, it's 2022. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I'm a Florida girl, born and raised, and a lot of people, including independents, lean Democrats, they like DeSantis. They're saying, you know what, if he runs in 24, I actually prefer him more than Trump. He's similar to Trump. He kind of has those conservative values, but he is not Trump. That's something that a lot of voters in Florida like about him. So it is pretty baked in the cake. It's Charlie Crist. A lot of Floridians talk about how he's not that great of a candidate. He's switched a number of parties, right? So
that's one of his biggest challenges.
Very, allegiant to him.
Yeah.
So,
and he's run for a ton of offices, too.
Exactly. Yes, he has been governor.
That's for sure. One of the things I think that's fascinating about this moment, when you're thinking about some of these key battleground states in Pennsylvania, for example, and Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes, is it's not just a test of will Democrats or Republicans win control of Congress. It's also a real test for some of these progressive candidates, Navin, because we've seen in past races, and of course the criticism that progressives are always dealing with from their own party is, are they electable in a general election? What happens with Fetterman and Mandela Barnes, I think, may tell us a lot.
Yeah, I actually think, and the fact that both of these candidates are, either leading or neck and neck in states that are 50-50 states, right? These are not states that a progressive or Democrat should absolutely be running away with. It's a tough year for Democrats. And the fact that both of them have a real shot at winning in tough Midwestern states, I think it also underscores that I think the place where a lot of progressive candidates have an advantage is on a populist economic message. And you've seen both Mandela Barnes and John Fetterman lean into that. And I think it'll really, pave a way forward for Democrats in these kinds of states.
Jim, if we see one of these progressive candidates, either Fetterman or Mandela Barnes, pull out a win, what does that say to Democrats and to Republicans more broadly?
Well, I think that midterms are traditionally about turnout. So, it means that the Democrats did a really good job of turning out their vote. And it also means that we had some challenged candidates, and we do. Mitch was right. There were... I could go through the whole list of them, and I'll probably drum myself out of my party if I do that on television. But I'm saying is that we have some weak guys, and Fetterman and Barnes are good candidates.
Yeah. Let me read something that progressive Democrats sent this letter yesterday to the president, calling for U.S. negotiation with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. And today, Marianna, they actually withdrew it. What's the impact of that? Does it make progressives look unprepared, not tuned into this moment and where the broader kind of U.S. policy is on this critical issue?
I was texting with House Democrats and aides all this morning, and they were angry. And progressives were angry at Jayapal for putting out that letter. A lot of the blame, I know the statement that came out said this was a staffer mistake. Behind the scenes, a lot of people are blaming her, and she has ambitions to run for leadership and also potentially run again for progressive chair. And I've had some people tell me she just blew her chances because she didn't go back and check in with the people who signed over the summer to say, hey, I'm putting this out. So there's that internal politics. But even the bigger picture, since I've been covering these House races, is the class of 2018 was the majority makers for the Democrats. You saw the squad come in. You saw the liberal wing, a lot of attention to them because they really were able to gin up the base and turn out a lot of Democrats in historic margins. But the real majority makers were those moderate frontline Democrats who right now are fighting the tough fight, trying to stay in the races. And I think that Democrats, regardless of what the results will be, will have to have a moment of reflection and say, what is a takeaway for our party and what's the pathway for keeping the majority longer than just 2 terms.
Well, Marianna's reporting is fantastic on this, Navin. What are the potential implications for these progressive candidates? They weren't a part of sending that letter out and then pulling it back, which is almost worse. But does it cast a cloud?
My hope, again, I think the hope is that this is a one-day story. I think the Congresswoman has done the right thing, I think, in retracting it and trying to move forward, recognizing, and of all of the issues going on right now, I mean, you know, I think Ukraine is low on the list of what's actually going to drive the election turnout. Yeah. So in the short term, it just doesn't feel like it'll be that consequential 14 days from now.
Jim, final question to you quickly. President Biden has said that Republicans do have the momentum right now, but he thinks it's going to shift back. As you watch these final 14 days, what's the X factor that you think could happen to actually make that happen?
If Trump gets involved, I think that's going to be a problem. And right now he's being quiet, thank God. But I think that I think the Republicans right now, their messaging is going well. They see they have their eyes on the prize, and they're moving in the direction they need to be moving in. And they're concentrating on the issues that need to be concentrated on. But there's always that X factor, you know, and these polls are crazy too. I mean, sorry.
No, that's great. No, that's great.
I just heard in my ear, I gotta
go. Thank you all. What a great conversation. Thank you. We covered a lot of ground. Marianna, Navin, and Jim, thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.